Ladies and gentlemen, the party has just begun.
A lot of new MMA fans don't even know who Tony Ferguson is and what he's done in UFC. In a nutshell, this is a Tasmanian devil who demolishes everyone in the lightweight division, turning them into dust. But if you are interested in a more detailed analysis of Tony Ferguson, then sit back. This is MMA time. And this is an analysis of Tony Ferguson's technique. In this video we will show you the best techniques of Tony Ferguson on his prime, and we'll figure out what's left from the Tasmanian devil that we knew. Let's start with the distance of the fight. Tony is one of the most versatile MMA fighters. He skillfully manages the distance. He can easily go from a long distance directly to the wrestling, from the close distance to the long, and mix them in different ways. His uniqueness lies in the unexpected decisions he makes during the fight, from the distance of the fight to his weapon in battle. Ferguson has a huge number of weapons in his arsenal. These weapons he uses depending on the distance and the enemy. Let's start with his Transformer's hands. These are fists that turn into elbows. El Cucuy uses them at long, medium and even short distances. Ferguson doesn't like the classic jab. Instead of these, he often uses an uppercut with his front hand. He fills the distance with it, creates deceptions and causes serious damage. Why an uppercut? It's simple. Tony's uppercut with a slight movement of the hand can be turned into the 6-12 elbow strike. If Ferguson delivers a significant uppercut and sees that the opponent is closing the distance, he immediately transforms it into an elbow. This shot has repeatedly shocked and cut opponents. Tony's hook has the same sense as the uppercut. If the opponent approaches the distance too quickly or dives under the punch, Tony turns it into an elbow and, with a high probability, cuts his opponent. Sometimes he uses his elbows to enter the clinch, but that's not all of the long-range weapon. Ferguson skillfully and in his own way uses his legs. An obvious proof of these words is his front kick to the body and inside low kick. The front kick is often used as a jab. He can control the distance without letting the enemy get closer or further. With the front kick he can close the distance and immediately beat opponent with a hook or elbow in the short distance. The next weapons in the arsenal – low kicks and body kicks. Tony uses kicks as a binder of his combinations. He can start combinations with these kicks to knock down an opponent, or he can throw it between combinations, or he can complete a series of punches with a strong body kick, as he often does, then the opponent is already backing away after an attack by El Cucuy. For closing the distance, Tony has a couple of tricks too. For example, the pendulum steps and combinations. Despite the criticism that he misses a lot of punches, Ferguson manages to keep the distance by moving to the sides with the hail of punches. He makes more power from every step because of momentum. It also helps him to avoid opponent's shots. This technique is often used by boxers. One of the most famous who used the pendulum steps was Mike Tyson. But basic and classic techniques are not what Tony is loved for. So let's talk about one of the most extraordinary methods of approaching the distance from Ferguson. This is an imaginary roll. If he needs to drag you to the ground from a long distance, he will do it as unexpectedly and unconventionally as possible. Tony doesn't like classic takedowns. Instead, he used his legendary imaginary roll. Often he punches a jab or 1-2 in order to distract the opponent's attention and grabs the opponent's leg from afar. He is very good at grappling. There is no difference for him to be from above or from below. Often after this technique he finds himself in a 50-50 position, where he punches hammer fists or elbows and then tries to get the dominant position. If the opponent survived in the grappling, then it's too early for him to rejoice. Ferguson has already studied his habits and reactions. Tony doesn't just dances and makes strange moves. He checks for the reactions. He doesn't calculate everything like it does GSP or Adesanya. It's just Tony's nature and instincts. It may seem that Tony is just fooling around in the octagon, but it all makes sense, because in these dances and shoulder twitches hide his future attacks. When Ferguson has already received the necessary reactions, he can make real full-fledged punches from those shoulder moves. His kicks, hooks and elbows go by momentum. It looks like a real martial dance. In the striking after grappling, as a rule, the fight continues with even more pressure than before. Tony throws himself at his opponent with a variety of punches, elbows, knees, Superman punches, sometimes using the cage. All this arsenal in Ferguson's head is being shaken up and, like a ball of predictions, give out the right decisions, which Tony throws out in a very different order, and it's hard to predict. But there are also types of elbow strikes that can be predicted. For example, when Tony fails with his hook or the opponent cuts the angle, the elbow strike will follow the failed hook as a way out of the situation. Gagey was catching Tony with this too. But all these tricks in the arsenal will not work if the right tactics are missing. El Cucuy has repeatedly said that he never bothers about the game plan. He is focused on improving his skills and game plans in the course of the fight. It all depends on the opponent, or rather, on how much Ferguson respects him. Tony's attitude towards opponents can be divided into conditional three categories. The first is when El Cucuy does not consider his opponent as human being. A great example is the fight with Kevin Lee. Tony throughout the fight mainly worked with the front hand and inside low kick. It was enough to keep Kevin at a distance and exhaust him. Except for one dangerous moment in the first round, Lee did not manage to create dangerous moments. Combinations with one hand clearly unsettled opponent. Lee very often loses moments for cutting corners and just rushes in front. In one of the interviews, Josh Barnett said that in the fight with Andrei Orlovsky he was most surprised by combinations with one hand. Andrei could throw 2-3 punches, and out of unaccustomedness Josh did not know what to do with it. Ferguson clearly noticed this and added it to his arsenal. The second type of opponents are those whom Tony already considers to be people, but does not feel threatened. An example is Rafael dos Anjos. In this fight, El Cucuy added more and more moves from his arsenal every round. He adapted depending on how Rafael adapted to Tony. To make it clearer, here is an example. Ferguson worked a lot with a front uppercut and elbows, and dos Anjos studied timing and began to counterattack. Tony noticed this and added a right straight and hook to his arsenal, and so with each round his attacks became more and more complex. Well, the third type of opponents, whose Ferguson sees a real threat, that was Edson Barboza. At the time of the fight, Edson was one step away from the title fight, and Tony was on the outskirts of the top 10 of lightweight. El Cucuy used his entire arsenal against Barboza from the very first second, from various attacks in the stand-up to transitions to the ground. From such pressure and variety of attacks, Barboza ran out of steam in first round. And in the second, Tony managed to take to his signature finisher, Darce choke. He finished opponents in the UFC 3 times with this move. Ferguson uses darts from completely different positions, but his favorite is from the clinch. As soon as the opponent lowers his head or tries to enter the clinch, Tony immediately grabs the opponent's neck and drags it to the ground, like a real predator. It is with this word that one can describe the mentality of El Cucuy. Then he smells blood, he methodically shreds the enemy like a hyena, eats him alive until he surrenders. Everything that we have just told about Tony Ferguson would not work if it were not for one of his properties – mental strength. Tony is one of the most strong-willed fighters. Even despite his rather weak jaw, he always goes forward and crushes the opponent. And if he gets knocked down, it means nothing to him, because you cannot finish Ferguson when he immediately catches you in the guard after a knockdown, and if nothing had happened, smiles right in your face. At these moments, the opponents understand that they cannot crack this nut and the only hope is a victory by decision. But Tony gets up and continues his dances with his elbows, driving his opponent into corner and shooting bursts of punches. He constantly communicates with his opponent, laughing and pointing at the canvas, Dos Santos style, making it clear that this is his territory. But it was peak Ferguson. Now it is clear that the octagon is no longer his territory. After a nervous breakdown, drug treatment and, in addition, age, Tony went into decline. In the cowboy fight, his slowdown was noticeable. Ferguson was never the fastest fighter, but he was noticeably slower than usual. Mental problems were noticeable in the fight with Gage, when he ignored logical solutions to problems and simply did not work according to plan. He just wanted to enter exchanges in a stupidest way to satisfy his ego. This desire to exchange in pocket had a striking effect on his health and jaw. After the fight with Gage, Tony began to take damage noticeably worse. As a result, slowing down, bad reaction and damage. Wrestling also became a problem. It is difficult for him to take down opponents, and the lack of creativity does not allow him to catch the opponent with a sudden imaginary roll. The takedown defense got even worse. Tony already loved throwing chokes rather than sprawl, but now his holes in technique have become noticeable. If you do not try to quickly get out of the guard and work methodically, then Ferguson will not even be able to back to his feet. In a couple of years, the most versatile and intimidating fighter has turned into a predictable shadow of himself, and the fight with Michael Chandler is likely to put an end to his career. This time, it will not be a dominant decision or technical knockout, but a brutal decapitation of El Cucuy.